Original Minnesota Viking Frank Youso has passed away Saturday, October 8th at the age of 86. The Vikings are mourning the loss and sending condolences to the family of the tackle who was acquired in the 1961 expansion draft ahead of Minnesota's first season. Youso became the first Minnesota native of International Falls and University of Minnesota's Golden Gophers to play for the Vikings. Starting at right tackle and teaming with Pro Football Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkenton for the first two Vikings seasons. Frank Youso was a gentle giant and a great asset to us as our starting tackle in our first year back in 1961, Tarkenton said. He was a big, powerful man who was a Minnesota guy through and through. He was a picture-perfect offensive tackle, a damn good player, Tarkenton added. After starting 32 of 36 games for the New York Giants from 1958 to 60, the second-round pick was left among its unprotected players as the Minnesota franchise prepared to build its initial roster through an expansion draft. Frank's son Brian and grandson Matt Youso talk about Frank during a recent interview on RJ Broadcasting's Let's Talk About It.
Yeah, we've got a couple of guests with us this morning, Brian Youso and Matt Youso, son and grandson of Frank Youso. And guys, thanks for being here this morning to talk about Frank, because he was one special guy for me, and I'm sure obviously being dad and grandpa, he was had a special place. But Brian, we were just talking that maybe over the last couple of years it was there were some tough times, but passed away pretty quickly here over the last week on Sunday.
Yeah, he spent a few days in the hospital is all, and then went peacefully. We were all there, and but we sure were lucky to have him for all the years we had him. He was a blessing and a good dad, good husband, good grandpa. And that's why I brought Matt along to help me out here.
Everybody probably a lot of people probably had a chance to meet Frank, and I probably, knew Frank from church most of all, but really got to know him when we inducted him into the Hall of Fame. And he was such a helpful guy with information not only about himself but others. All of a sudden I would need, hey Frank, I need some information, come on over to the house. And of course we'd sit down and we'd chat for quite a while, and then we'd get down to business. And I think that was the one thing that I loved about Frank, was that he was a regular guy. He was famous, but he was a regular guy.
Right. He treated everybody the same, no matter who you were. And he loved to tell a story. He was a storyteller, and he kept everyone's attention all the time. And people just gravitated towards him. And you walk in a room, and the light shined on him, and he loved it. He loved people, and he really loved International Falls. And he had opportunities to work in other cities and different states, and no, he couldn't leave International Falls. He said, this is the greatest place on earth right here, and that's where he wanted to raise a family. I think my mom was a big influence on that. She said, we're not going to California. You're coming back to International Falls. And he was always a big supporter, He loved it here.
Yeah, Matt, we were talking here at the station about football. It obviously was a big part of who he was. Did he talk a lot about it with you when you came around, and when you were a kid? Did he talk about it a lot?
Not really. He let.
Try that. Somehow that microphone's not on. I don't think. Go ahead.
No, he's good.
Okay.
Not really. He let us do what we wanted. Jake and myself both. He didn't pressure us toward any specific sport, nothing like that. We weren't blessed with his size. So I think hockey was the better route for both of us to take.
Yeah. Did he ever? Did you always maybe ask him about playing professional football, or was that just something that he was grandpa and it was never part of the conversation?
I don't remember specifically who would bring up the conversations. My grandpa was a great storyteller, so he would, tell my brother and I lots of stories about his days playing football, and it was always very fun to listen to him tell those stories. But yeah, he was very supportive of the hockey too. I remember when we were growing up, he talked about wishing maybe he would have played hockey. He enjoyed watching us play so much, but again, I think football suited him well. So
He did play hockey once.
Yeah.
I was a peewee, and he went out for Parents' Day, and they found a pair of black figure skates, the only ones that could fit him. He put his old Oakland Raiders shoulder pads and jersey on, and an old football helmet, and he held on to the side of the boards, and they stuck him by the net until he finally scored a goal, and then everyone tackled him on the peewee team. And that was fun. So that was his only day on the ice.
No, if I remember, did he play basketball?
Loved basketball. I think basketball was his true love. He just loved to play basketball, and he played for I think they were called the Galloping Gophers.
Okay.
During the summer, they had a team, and they'd travel around. I think that's in his book, and go from town to town and take on the home teams, and they had a good time doing that. You talk about encouraging. When I was a young lad, he discouraged me from playing football because I was so small. In 8th grade, I hurt my knee playing football. He said, "That's enough for that."
Really?
Oh yeah. He says, "You're too small. You're going to get hurt out there. You go run." He said, "Run."
You're pretty tall now.
I grew later, but at the time I was the tiniest one. He said, "You can't play this sport. You're going to get hurt. You go run cross country or do something that doesn't have any physical contact." So he was looking out for me. He didn't want my knees all banged up like his were. So
Yeah, talk a little bit about the football and how it transitioned into what he did after football. I think because a lot of athletes these days, they've got the money to go live off of it. They don't really have to go do anything. Your dad had to go out and find a job and support the 4 kids.
in off season.
Yeah.
He sold insurance. He worked in the mill. And they had the motel. So you're always working. They didn't pay enough. He was the highest paid lineman the Giants had, and he got $8,000 with a $2,000 bonus. And actually, Mr. O'Mara tried to tell him, no, it wasn't 10, it was 6 and 2. Because he was a 21-year-old young man. They didn't have agents back then. They shook hands, and my dad said, "That's not the deal I made." He said, "Well, Frank, we can't afford it anymore." And he said, "Well, I'm not playing for any less." And he let him get to the door, and he said, "Okay, Frank, you got it." But he thought, can you imagine?
Yeah.
And so different time, but yeah, you'd have to come home in off season work, to support the family, and so then after football, he had enough. I mean, body beat up, and I think he might have worked in the mill a little bit then, but then they already had the motel, and then he bought the resort in Captogama. So that was another adventure, and that was
How long did they own the resort?
They had it for 7 years, but 2 businesses 30 miles away, and it was a tough 7 years. But
Sure.
they got through it, and things got a lot better after that.
Talk about maybe, Matt, about one memory of Grandpa that kind of sticks out that you'll take with you here after his passing.
That's a hard question because I have a lot of great ones of my Grandpa Frank. I always tell people. Actually, I was just talking to you about it last night, Dad. I can't even tell you how many times I struck up a conversation with someone I didn't know. Wherever it was in the country I was at, they might have an Oakland Raiders hat or a Viking sweatshirt or something like that. I would just strike up a conversation with a stranger. Oh, my grandpa played for that team, and it was always fun.
Sure.
It was always a way to break the ice, so to speak, with someone you didn't know. But I think one of the memories I have specifically that with him would probably be when I was in high school. We were playing against a team in Duluth, and their student section was getting kind of rambunctious, yelling, cursing, and standing up, causing a scene. And my Grandpa Frank told one of the kids to sit down, and the kid said, "You can't make me sit down." And Grandpa Frank just grabbed him and with one hand and slowly sat the kid down. I don't think the kid realized how powerful he was. And to add to that, I remember my senior graduation party. My grandpa had this game where you'd lock middle fingers and you would, try to, kind of like arm wrestling almost, but with your middle fingers. And I thought, I'll take him on. He's old man now. I'm young and fit and I remember locking fingers with him and just immediately realizing I'd made a mistake.
Well, I assume his hands were pretty large, I'm guessing.
Yeah, crazy.
And the power was still there.
Yeah. Lots of great memories, though. And he was always so supportive. And I tell people this because the conversation of football always gets brought up. And to be totally honest, I didn't care a whole lot about the football. I wish more and more people would have known about how big of a heart he had, how caring he was. Anywhere we went, he was pulling someone aside and conversing, and you never left the house without getting a big hug and being told that he loved you. And that was the side that I appreciated the most.
Sure. Brian?
Me too.
Yeah, you too.
Couldn't leave the house without a hug. So.
Yeah.
I can believe it.
Yeah, and there were big hugs.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, he grabbed you and just engulfed you, and he said, "Oh, you're so thin," And at the end, I said, "Dad, you're thin too," He still outweighed me, so
yeah.
There you go. But
Brian Youso, Matt Youso, thanks for being here this morning, talking about Dad and Grandpa for us. Again, a big hole left here in town.
Yeah, I'd also like to send my condolences out to the Koscheck family. I see Marguerite died, and the community sure lost the biggest supporter of International Falls with that wonderful lady. So
Two big holes this week.
Two big holes. So.
Brian and Matt, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.